Hello and welcome. My name's George, and my channel is all about helping you get the most out of Logic Pro so that you can record and produce your best music in your home studio. Today, we're once again continuing our Late Night by Camaro 67 sessions and series. And today, we're going to be looking at mixing our horns. So we've got trumpet, trombone, and baritone sax. I'm going to show you everything I've done to mix those in this session. So let's dive in. Okay, so to kick this off, let's have a little before and after to start. So we'll start with the unmixed horns. And I'm just adding this gain plugin just so the volume matches once all the other processed plugins are in there. So here's the dry, if you will, horns. And then the mixed horns. Okay, so I tried to match the volume as best as I could to give a true representation of the before and after. But with all the processing, we have a little bit of compression to help gel everything together so the three horns sound cohesive and not one of them kind of gets louder than the other, that they're nice and blended throughout, and then some EQ to shape and just make it sound as good as possible. And then some reverb to help add some space and depth to those horns as well. So in a nutshell, that's what's happening. And let's dive into the specifics. Now, before we do that, if you haven't been following along in this series, just to catch you up a little bit, we've so far mixed our drums, our bass, and our guitars. And right now we're doing our horns. So we still have the keys and percussion congas to do, which we'll do in the following weeks. Now, for the horns specifically, we had originally recorded these live off the floor with everyone else, so all 9 musicians, and then later on we decided to have a separate session with just the horns so that we could really take our time and get the best takes possible. So we recorded multiple takes of each section and then chose the best ones, as you can see here in our comps here. You can see we have 3 or 4 takes of each section and then just selected the best ones. Now, quick note, I haven't flattened these take folders yet, which I usually like to do before getting to the mix process. I like to kind of commit to the takes and go from there. But to be honest, I haven't spent a ton of time yet listening to all of the individual takes and making sure I'm happy with them. So I'm just leaving them for now. And then in the mixing stage, if things pop up, then I can go and grab what I need from these take folders. As we get closer to the final mix, I will flatten all these take folders and then also kind of cut out any of the dead space here. Okay, so now back to the mixing. So I'll open up my mixer here. Now with these horns, we kind of have to treat them in 2 different ways, both individually as their own individual instruments, but ultimately as a section and a group. So I have my 3 tracks here, but I also have all 3 of them sent to this track stack right here that I've just named horns, and I can minimize and expand that. And to create that track stack, you just select your 3 tracks, right click, and go create track stack. So why don't we start with the baritone sax? I'll just solo that. and open up my virtual mix rack. This is a plugin I was using in previous videos, and basically it just allows me to create kind of a channel strip within this one plugin. So why don't I mute all of these to start, and I'll go ahead and mute the reverb as well. So we start with the dry signal. So for starters, we have this virtual console channel, and I have this set to the Neve. So this is just supposed to emulate a hardware console. And the Neve setting, I just find it just adds some nice body to everything. So that's typically what I go for. It is subtle, but I do find that it does add a little bit of that body. And then the next, we have our compressor. And as with most things, I usually compress kind of around the 3 decibel range. So you can dial that in using the threshold. And that's just going to catch some of the louder notes to help everything sound nice and cohesive. And you might notice it got a little bit quieter, and that's this gain reduction happening because we're basically lowering the volume in most places by 3 dB. So if you wanted to, you could add that back in with the makeup gain. I'm not too concerned with it, so I'm just going to leave it back at 0. Now this next EQ, this is an SSL EQ, and you can tell by the knobs here, we're not actually using it. Everything is set to 0. So I can go ahead and remove that altogether. And then in the next I have is the Neve EQ. And here I've got the high shelf. So boosting the high end a little bit, 1.59 decibels. And then I have another boost around 1.4 kilohertz. And another boost in the low end at 381 hertz. And then lastly, filtering out the very low end at 100 hertz. So the before and after. So this is before. And then after. So both adding presence in the high end, and then with the baritone sax in particular, it has that real nice low end, and that's something I definitely want to preserve. So kind of boosted some of that as well, just to make sure that comes out nicely. And then lastly, I have this Revival plugin, and it's quite a simple plugin. There's a shimmer and a thickness knob. So shimmer is more the high end, thickness is the low end. So just added a little bit of that thickness again to get kind of that nice low end from that baritone sax. And there we go. So that's all our EQ and compression processing on the baritone sax. And you can do this with any compressor or EQ. You can, of course, use the Logic compressor, adjust the threshold so that you're in that -3 range. And then the EQ, you can do the same thing that I did with that other one. So I rolled off a little bit of that 100 and then a boost around, I believe it was around 340, and then a little bit of a high shelf, and then there was another boost kind of around this range. So it would look something like that. And then we want to add our reverb to add some space in depth. So when we mixed our guitar, we previously had a hall reverb, which is longer 4 seconds, and a plate reverb as well, which was a little bit shorter at 1.8 seconds. And again, this is using the Valhalla reverb, but you can use any of the Logic reverbs, such as Space Designer, for example. And in the case of the concert hall, you go to your presets. If you go to halls, you can see a whole bunch of different concert halls here, and you can see the lengths. So, for example, this Prince Hall 3.9. So that's really close in length to what I have set here. And then one other thing to mention with the reverbs is I have this EQ set after the reverb just to filter out the low end and the high end. That's doing a few things. It allows me to boost more of the reverb without getting kind of any of the harsh high end. But also in the guitar track, for example, there's a little bit of bleed from the drums, and the hi-hats in particular, those can really poke out in the reverb in the high end when you start adding the reverb. So that helps filter that out as well. So first, let's hear with the shorter plate reverb. That sounds like this. And then I'll add in the longer concert hall. So less of the concert hall, but that just helps those notes kind of linger a little bit longer in the background. And then the main reverb is the shorter plate reverb. So I approach this similar the way I do a vocal, compression, EQ, and then usually two different reverbs. On a vocal, I'll a lot of times add some stereo delay. In the case of horns, I like to keep it a little bit more natural sounding, so I'm going to skip the delay for these. Now for the trumpet and trombone, I treat them basically the same. The only differing thing is going to be the EQ. So again, the compressor is going to be around that kind of -3 range. And in the case of the trombone, I'm filtering out more of the low end, 122 hertz versus 100 with the baritone, mainly because the trumpet lives more in that higher register. It doesn't have those low notes that the sax has, so you can filter out more of it without it affecting the instrument. And in the trumpet, I have a little bit of a boost at 862 hertz, as well as 2.1 kilohertz, and then again, a bit of that high shelf. And in the revival, I add a little bit of the shimmer and none of the thickness in this case. And then for the trombone, again, same compression in that -3. And you can see that trombone in particular can get some really loud notes. So that's going to catch all of those and help tame that a little bit. This SSL EQ, again, we can get rid of that because that's not doing anything. And then the trombone, again, trombone similar to the baritone sax, more low end. So I'm just filtering out 100 hertz. And then a boost at 850, 4.26 kilohertz, and then that high shelf again. So now that I've processed them all individually and happy with the sound individually, now it's time to look at them as a group. So the first thing is just getting the balance. So I'll bring all these three down, and then I'll just bring them up one by one to get a nice balance between the three. Okay, there we go. So soloed, those sound nice and balanced together. Once we listen with all the other instruments, we might make some changes, but we'll start with that. And then what I like to do, since I have these all sent to a group, is do a little bit of processing on the group itself. So I have the Slate Digital virtual tape machine. And again, this is a bit of a subtle thing, but just adds kind of a little bit of warmth to the group. So let me play a little before and after of that. So to me, it just kind of livens them up a little bit. I can't tell you exactly what it's doing, but all I know is I like it with it on, so I'm going with that. Next, I have this Golfos plugin, which I do have a dedicated video on this, and this is kind of an automated EQ. And the main things you have to work with are this recover and tame. So it'll recover frequencies that it thinks are getting kind of buried, and it'll also tame frequencies that it thinks are kind of overbearing. And I have this set here to bypass the low end, so anything below 121 hertz, it's not affecting. So I'll play the before and after of that. This is the after to start. So I find it just kind of helps all the instruments in the group have their place without anything kind of jumping up. It just gels them together a little bit more. And then lastly, I just have this compressor to, again, just help gel the three of those together. So it's compressing the group entirely. And now since I already have compression on them individually, this is just doing a little bit of compression. So just be around kind of the 1 decibel range. And I do find this particular compressor actually, to me, kind of brightens up the sound as well. So it's adding a little bit of tonal character to that too. And then lastly, this gain plugin that I just had for the example in the beginning, just to try and gain stage the before and after. So I'll get rid of that. And then now that we have this blended the way we want to our group, now I can use the group to blend that in with the rest of the song. So I'm going to bring that down, go ahead and press play, and then bring this up to get the blend with the rest of the band. And there we go. So I just did a few little subtle volume changes on the individual tracks once everything else was in there, but I'm liking how that's sounding. So now we still have our keyboards to add in, as well as our congas and additional percussion there. But things are starting to sound good. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, please make sure to leave those in the comments below. And if you want to follow along for the rest of the series, make sure that you like like, and subscribe. And lastly, if you want to improve your workflow in Logic Pro, don't forget to download my free Ultimate Logic Pro Starter Pack. This includes my Logic Pro hotkey cheat sheet with all the most common shortcuts right at your fingertips, my audio recording checklist to make sure that your recording sessions go as flawlessly as possible, my mixing guide, which includes a reference to all the most common Logic Pro mixing plugins, and my gear guide if you're just getting started and you want to know exactly what gear to get, and lastly, my Logic Pro session templates so that you can get up and running right away. I hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you in the next one.